Shady Rest, Preserve Shady Rest Committee is here, and we have Mr. Tom Donatelli, who will be the, he is the chair of the committee and will be a key presenter. So I give you the Shady Rest Committee. What a story. Take a listen.
Thank you. Again, we are Shady Rest, Preserve the Shady Rest Committee. A little bit of history about Shady Rest and what it is. Going back many, many years ago, the building that Shady Rest is housed in today was a farmhouse that was built in the year 1760, pre-Revolutionary War. And through the years, the farmhouse, back in the old years, it was a strawberry farm in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. And through the years, it became a tavern, and it became a hotel, and et cetera. And in 1900, it was purchased by a country club called Westfield Country Club, or Westfield Golf Club, and they built a 9-hole golf course there. So through the early 1900s, as the community grew around it, the club wanted to expand to 18 holes. And because of the housing developments that were popping up, they weren't able to do that, so they actually sold the property and they moved to another place in Westfield, New Jersey, and they called themselves Echo Lake Country Club. And the property was sold to a group of black realtors from New York City called the Progressive Realty Company. So they, for $100,000, they bought the 37 acres of Shady Rest, and they became the first ever black-owned country club in the United States. So through the years at Shady Rest Country Club, there were many performers that came to visit. A lot of people, a lot of the old performers from New York City and from Newark, New Jersey, they would go to after-hour parties at the Shady Rest. And some of the performers that were there were Ella Fitzgerald and Cab Calloway, and Louis Armstrong played there. Sarah Vaughan was popular there as well. So they had many, many events, and the whole thing about Shady Rest was that it was a place for the community. And it was a black section in that part of town. It was called Jerseyland, and all of the blacks from Jerseyland were able to perform, not perform so much, but were able to involve themselves in the community activities. They were famous for their waffles and chicken breakfasts. They had numerous recipes that everybody came to. They were able to go and buy takeout lunches and dinners. They didn't have to be a member of the club, but it was a club for the community. But also, it was also for the prestigious who were the members there. So as the years went, there was also a professional golfer his name was John Shippen, who was the first ever American professional golfer, and it so happened that he was African American. So he's the first African American professional golfer in the United States. And in 1933, he became the pro and the greenskeeper and the caddy master at Shady Rest. And as we talked a little bit earlier today, the UGA had their first ever tournament at Shady Rest in 1925. That I don't know if John Shippen was in that. He probably was. But he wasn't the pro at the time, but then there were, later on, there were more tournaments at Shady Rest. So what I like to do is I like to show a documentary that was done in, I believe it was 1996 or 7. A gentleman named Larry Londino did this as a college. He was a college professor, and he did this as a project. And it's going to give you a good idea of what Shady Rest was all about. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the projects that we're working on now to restore Shady Rest and to bring it back to what it was. So let's watch the documentary, and I think it'll be very entertaining and educational for you all. Thank you.
Shady Rest is a place that I grew up on. I moved here to Scotch Plains when I was 5 years old from Virginia. And my aunt, she owned the grocery store right across from the First Tee. And I had another aunt that owned the grocery store on the other side of the street across from the Ninth Fairway. So I would have to cross the golf course to go from one house to the other.
Well, I was born not too far from here, on Madison Avenue in Westfield. And I came here as a young lad. I used to caddy here. In fact, when I was in late grade school and high school. And then before my college days, I came here. And originally it was not a black course, it was a private course.
You could bring your families out here, and the kids had a place to play and run around, and your wife, whatnot, they sit out there on the porch with friends and play cards while we was playing golf. And then after golf, they had a bar, they had a restaurant, and if you want to stay over at night, you could dance, you know. And it was a place. It was no other place around here like this. This is the only one and only. The one and only Shady Rest. And I don't think there'll ever be another club like Shady Rest.
The story of Shady Rest begins at the Westfield Country Club, which was established in 1900 and featured a 9-hole golf course north of the Westfield train line on Jerusalem Road in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. On either side of the club was an African-American community of small houses, and the residents would routinely cut across the golf course to get to the train line or to socialize. Over a period of years, a right of travel evolved, which later affected the legal rights of the all-white private club. And in 1921, when the Westfield Country Club considered plans to expand the course to 18 holes, this legal condition undoubtedly affected their decision. They chose instead to sell the club and merge with the Cranford Golf Club to form the Echo Lake Country Club in Springfield. The former Westfield Club was mortgaged to the Progressive Realty Company, created by a group of prominent African Americans, and became the Shady Rest Country Club, considered to be the first African American golf and country club in America. There were other black-owned and/or operated golf courses before and during this period, but no other had combined golf with the clubhouse, restaurant, lockers, tennis courts, horseback riding, skeet shooting, croquet, and social activities that were available at Shady Rest and generally associated with country clubs of the era. Shady Rest was run by and for blacks and became an important social and economic institution in the local community and the New York metropolitan area.
What did Shady Rest mean to its community, and what did white country clubs mean to their community? Is a very interesting question. I think that white country clubs tend to be more insular, more isolated, more removed from the community. Basically, they're just for the membership. But I don't get the sense that there was this pride invested in the white country club by people in the local community that I find in a place like Scotch Plains in relation to Shady Rest. This institution seemed to stand as some kind of beacon for what blacks could accomplish. Furthermore, the arenas for black social and recreational outlet were so limited that Shady Rest took on a number of functions that a white country club would not. So in this sense, something that is owned by blacks, operated by blacks, for the benefit of blacks, I think sort of transcends the bounds of the normal country club and stands as a community institution much more than a white country club would.
In addition to the golf, we had tremendous tennis. We had 6 tennis courts, championship tennis courts here. Right back behind me where the 9th green is was 3 courts, stadium courts. They had a stadium surrounding them. And just below us there was 3 others. And we had the top black tennis pros and players in the country that came here to play. Of course, Althea Gibson played here, and she was later. But prior to that, they had pros named Dr. Reginald Weir, Erie Sach, Ora Washington, which was an old timer at that time when I was a youngster, and she was a top tennis player. Matilda Davis, Dr. Matilda Davis and her family. Even Mr. Willis, who owned the course at the time, he was a great tennis buff, and his whole family played. His daughter Phyllis, his son Billy, the other son DeWitt, and his nephew Jeff. They were all top-notch tennis players. So it was great fun here, and I grew up with this, so I know it all.
Almost every Saturday night, some kind of function was being arranged in the club, a dance or something, and most of that was community-oriented. The people from the community would participate in those activities. Some of them were free, some of them were, they charged admission to, but not all. But mostly, most of the time it was dances, open to the public, open to the community, and it was a community-oriented thing. And on certain occasions, black professional musicians used to play here a lot. A lot of the old-time musicians like Cab Calloway and Jimmy Lunsford and Earl Hines, they all played here.
At Shady Rest, when we first made that appearance for that one night thing that we did, and then it became a weekly thing like Saturday and Sunday, they had other bands there, and they just shoved us aside. If they had a big-time band coming in, they just tell us, well, you're not playing this weekend because we got Count Basie coming in, or we got Jimmy Lunsford coming in, or Lionel Hampton, or one of the other big bands. And we said, oh yeah, well, we were glad not to play because we wanted to see what they sounded like too. So we didn't mind not playing because they had a big band coming in. So that's how that went. And then a lot of times we'd come out early in the daytime on nights that we weren't playing, that they were going to have a big band there. We'd come out there early, and we knew a lot of the girls out there, and we'd hang out there until it was time for the big band to show up. And then they let us in for nothing because we were like the house band.
There was an experience where Ella Fitzgerald was here with the Chick Webb band when she was singing with Chick Webb, when the bus used to come up off of 22 Highway and come up Jerusalem Road to the club. One time the bus pulled up, and my youngest sister, she lives in Atlantic City now, she was the first one up to the bus when the door opened. And when Ella stepped off the bus, she placed a silver dollar in the palm of her hand. She kept that silver dollar for years like that. She was one of the first children at the bus. And Ella, when she stepped off the bus, she gave her a silver dollar.
In 1925, the first National Colored Golf Championship was held at Shady Rest. This championship was organized by a group formed earlier that year in Washington, D.C., called the United States Colored Golfers Association. B.C. Gordon, president of Shady Rest, was elected the president of this new organization. 2 years later, the group was renamed the United Golfers Association, an organization that served as the governing body of black golf until desegregation opened up many public courses to blacks in the mid-'60s. In that same year, 1925, a fight for control of Shady Rest erupted over mismanagement of the club's finances between forces representing a New York contingent headed by Henry C. Parker and a local group from New Jersey. The local group managed to vote out the New York slate of club officers. But the New York group was reinstated after the election was challenged in the courts. However, sometime following this controversy, it was rumored that Parker and another New York member, John E. Nail, left Shady Rest along with money collected to pay off the mortgage, leaving the club in substantial debt. It was at this point that William Willis Sr. assumed control of Shady Rest.
He owned the place. After Nails and Parker left, right, with the monies that they had gathered, I guess, for the purchase of the place, or to pay the mortgage off, they left, they skipped town with it. And there was a matter of $20,000 that closed the deal. And the old man came up with it, with Dr. Brock out of Westfield.
William Willis Sr. ran Shady Rest for the remainder of its history. In many ways, he represents the struggle of African Americans entering the mainstream of middle-class America. His son, William Jr., describes how his father accumulated money and eventually became involved with Shady Rest.
He's a regimental supply sergeant. He had a business head, right? And all the meats and whatnot, right, came through him. And then he would issue them out to, and the officers and whatnot. So he saw that the officers were well fed. And to show their appreciation, he used to loan money, right? I don't know, 2 for 1 or whatever, but he made money, right? And through the grapevine, you hear stories, right, that he used to like to gamble, and he's very lucky. And gambling, he won a lot of money. And then by loaning money, right, he also made a lot of money. Then I heard that there was a shipment going out, and the old man, the people that owed him the most money were being shipped. And the old man, through the years, by taking care of the officers, held up the shipment until payday. And then they got their money, and the old man could get his.
It was Willis's vision and financial skill that allowed Shady Rest to continue and prosper.
He just kept building, adding. And then people would put obstacles in his way, saying that the place was closed, that they were going out of business. So to counteract that, every week he would have a named band come in out of New York, right? He worked with Joe Glazer and Cab Calloway, Blanche, all named bands. So he had to know somebody, right?
But in 1938, Shady Rest was forced to change ownership and became the property of the township of Scotch Plains.
These roads that you see that are paved, Plainfield Avenue, Jerusalem Road, they were nothing but dirt. And the trolley tracks stood that high up above the ground, right? So in 1930, the township, I guess, said they were going to put these 2 concrete roads through here. And there were nothing but blacks, poor people, and nothing but big woods here at the time. Nothing but woods, right? No business, no nothing. So the club, all the assessment would fall on the club. So the club couldn't carry that assessment, right? We'd only been operating for about 4 or 5 years. So it was suggested to the old man by Sheriff Campbell at the time. So Willis, let the township take it over, lease it year by year with a gentleman's handshake agreement, nothing in writing. So this is what he did. And it paid off because the club couldn't exist without these roads, right? So he had no alternative.
Throughout the shifts in control of Shady Rest, one enduring presence was that of John Shippen. Shippen came to the club in 1932 after a distinguished and historic career playing golf, as well as green superintendent at some of the most exclusive golf clubs on the East Coast. He was the son of an African-American Presbyterian minister who moved to the Shinnecock Indian Reservation on Long Island in 1888. At about that time, one of the first golf courses in America, the Shinnecock Hills Golf Course, was being constructed near the reservation where the young John Shippen eventually became a caddy. He developed an interest in playing the game, later gave lessons, and served as an assistant to Scotsman Willie Dunn, who functioned as the golf professional at Shinnecock. Although the PGA of America wouldn't be established until 1916, as such, John Shippen was the first American-born golfer to perform the duties of a golf professional. Shippen was good enough to compete in 5 U.S. Open championships through 1913.
Well, he only mentioned certain things at not necessarily U.S. Open, but I mentioned him saying that he played at the Shinnecock Country Club, and he said he taught these people like J.P. Morgan and so forth. And he mentioned J.P. Morgan as an example of where he didn't think much about the game, but people convinced him to try it. It so happened that his first attempt at hitting the ball, he hit it and it went on the green. And he convinced himself that the game wasn't a challenge and he wasn't going to bother with it. But I understand he gave instructions to a lot of prominent people.
Shippen's participation in the 1896 Open, held at Shinnecock Hills, sparked a racial controversy when a group of white players threatened to boycott the tournament if Shippen and Oscar Bunn, a Shinnecock Indian caddy, were allowed to play. However, Theodore Havmeyer, the president of the newly formed United States Golf Association, informed the disgruntled foreigners that Shippen and Bunn would play. And they did. Shippen was tied for the lead after the first 18 holes, but during the second round he encountered one bad hole and eventually finished 5th. There is conflicting evidence surrounding the question of John Shippen's race, whether he was an African American or part Shinnecock Indian. The consensus is that he was an African American of Jamaican ancestry. The fact that Shippen married a Shinnecock Indian woman and the tri-racial nature of the tribe has contributed to the dispute.
He was the first black in the Open, and he passed off as an Indian. But we didn't talk too much about it. But I recall one Sunday, all this family came out here in their Indian regalia, right? Oh, I don't know, about 8 or 9. And I had a good time out here on the porch, spent the whole afternoon. Again, I say I was young and I noticed it, right? Then after the years went by, learning more and more about Ship and reading the articles, because he never spoke of it, right? I put 2 and 2 together.
Although many of the members of Shady Rest were unaware of Shippen's golfing accomplishments before he came to Shady Rest, he was remembered for his influence on them as kids.
Everybody liked Chip. Everybody took an interest in him, and he took an interest in the kids. He never had any kids give him any problem as far as fighting or anything like that, or bad language. Or when they came over here and they started to caddy, they looked up to Ship. Very few of us, in the beginning, we called him Mr. Shippen, but he made it a point to call him Ship himself.
We as kids would follow him around, caddy for him. When he was working on the greens, we would go out and help him carry the flags and put them in the hole. And as a caddy, you get to learn the game because you don't have clubs of your own, but you take the opportunity to take the clubs out of the bag of the person you're caddying for, and out of eyesight, you would start swinging the club.
They had a tournament over here one time, one Sunday, and I I really wasn't aware. I don't know what happened. Somehow it got by me that they were having a big tournament that day, and they had a lot of people over here to play, you know, and they needed caddies. But for some reason, I wasn't here, and I had gone to church that Sunday, and it was near the end of the church service. I saw this young fellow that I knew who was a caddy, who was standing outside, you know, outside the door, outside the church, and I could see him. So I got up and went out to see what he wanted. You know, he looked like he was looking for somebody inside the place, and I got to ask him what he wanted, and he was looking for me. He said, "Come on, man." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "They got a big tournament over there, and Ship wants you to caddy." You know, he pulled me out of church to caddy in one of the tournaments. He said, "They need caddies over there. Ship looking for you."
He worked this way, and he lived here just like a father, uncle, or whatever. Buddies, right? He would get up in the morning and sweep the greens, you know, get the worm cast off and he'd cut the greens. He knew the upkeep of a golf course. And after that was done, he'd go up and relax, come down in his knickers on, and play golf with the guests or whoever, you know. And he made a little money, you know, betting. Different people would bring white fellows up, right, from Plainfield and different parts, come up to challenge Ship. Dr. Dura from Plainfield was good for that. He had the contact with these fellows that said they were good, and Ship would eat them up out here. Right? He could do anything with a golf ball.
In the year 1951, we had the club championship here, and I beat John Shippen. I was 4 down and 5 to go, 3 down and 5 to go, and I had 4 straight birdies. I birdied 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I beat John that day. Just one of those days when you're on.
So you beat the U.S. Open competitor?
Sadly, in 1968, John Shippen died at the age of 90, alone in a rest home in Newark, largely ignored. When the U.S. Open was played for the second time at Shinnecock Hills in 1986, John Shippen was mentioned in the opening of the telecast by ABC. Ironically, that's when many of the former members of Shady Rest became aware of his accomplishments. In 1963, the gentleman's agreement between William Willis Sr. and the township of Scotch Plains came to an end. Shady Rest became the Scotch Hills Country Club and was open to the public. Historians view this change with mixed emotions. While the end of Shady Rest is linked to the rise of integration in public facilities in the 1960s, there is ambivalence over the inevitable deterioration of this African-American institution.
What kind of price have black people paid for integration? We tend to think about integration in positive terms. First of all, I don't believe that African Americans have reached a true state of integration in the society, that integration tends to be superficial. And certainly the kind of integration that we have has tended to hurt black institutions. So what happens when municipal golf courses open up to blacks, when private courses open up to blacks, when other kinds of social institutions open their doors to blacks? Oftentimes black institutions will lose membership. New generations will not have the kind of rapport, relationship, endearment to a black institution as would those who came up in a segregated and exclusionary era. So Shady Rest's demise has to be linked to larger issues beyond the municipality, beyond the community, but in terms of the effects of the kinds of integration that we see taking place in American society.
Now it is with great pleasure I present to you Lee Elder, Senior PGA Touring Pro.
All right, give me
As a tribute to the memory of Shady Rest and John Shippen, a local Scotch Plains community group organized a series of events at Scotch Hills. a minority youth golf clinic featuring senior professional tour golfer Lee Elder, and an annual tournament named in the honor of John Shippen. The proceeds of these events resulted in the awarding of an annual minority golf scholarship and the commissioning of a painting of John Shippen by the late renowned African-American artist Don Miller. The painting is displayed prominently along with other Shippen memorabilia in the clubhouse at Scotch Hills Country Club.
To honor Alan Augustine.
The story of Shady Rest represents a symbol of black achievement during a period when African Americans were suffering even more than the Depression-era white Americans. The club offered the evolving black middle class a social and economic institution with access to activities not associated with the minority community. Shady Rest provided a forum for some of the most prominent African Americans of the period, from all spheres of influence: Althea Gibson, Ella Fitzgerald, W.E.B. Du Bois. It was also the home of John Shippen, the first American-born golf professional. It boasted a membership of working-class and professional men and women and their families, and provided an atmosphere of civility and belonging in what was otherwise a hostile and unfriendly world.
So today, Shady Rest still exists as a township-owned golf course. In 1964, the name was changed to Scotch Hills Country Club, and through the last 60 years or so, it's been operated by the Recreation Department of Scotch Plains, New Jersey. And in 2022, actually 2021, we had the 100-year anniversary gala of the beginning of Shady Rest Country Club. And in 2022, we worked very hard as a committee to get the property listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. And the mayor of Scotch Plains in 2022 renamed Scotch Hills to Shady Rest Country Club. So again, it is called Shady Rest Country Club, and our committee is dedicated to the restoration and the renovation of the building itself. So in 2010, give or take, the Recreation Department had a recreation director who wanted to tear the building down and build a new facility for the Recreation Department. And this committee got together with a mayor at the time who fought to keep that building and to preserve that building. And it was renovated to the point where the first floor was fixed up very nicely, and it has original floorboards. There's a grand ballroom that had the original flooring in it, which was since repaired. So it's being used presently for township meetings, senior meetings. So we have a senior senior lunches, and Our Recreation Commission today meets there, and a lot of different clubs meet there during the week, and it's rented out to people who want to have weddings and baptisms and 50-year-old birthday parties and all those kind of things. So right now, what is going on is we as a committee have been getting grants and small grants and some funding to create a master plan to renovate the building. So as of right now, we've gotten to the point where we have stage one or phase one of the master plan prepared, which shows all of the deficiencies in the building, all of the areas that need to be addressed. The building is over 250 years old. So it has very poor electric, it has a very poor air conditioning and heating system. For example, the last month and a half, we've had a lot of very cold weather. The heat doesn't work, but the meetings continue to go on. What did they do? They brought in electric heaters and space heaters so that people could still meet at the place. So that's going to be, we've actually in talks right now with our town management that phase one has to be to fix the heating and air conditioning and get the electric working correctly. So our committee, I don't know, maybe Jim, you want to come up and talk a little bit about how we started and who were some of the prime people that...
Yeah, I'll make some brief comments.
So I'd like to introduce Jim Cecchio. Just one word about Jim. Jim is the youngest son of Mauro Cecchio, who was a former mayor of Scotch Plains. And it was Mauro Cecchio who was very instrumental in bringing the idea of Shady Rest being refurbished to the township. So I'd like to introduce Jim Cecchio for a...
Thank you. I know I spoke a little bit before. I wanted to think it's pretty hard going after a veterans group and how incredible that was and how motivational it was just listening to those guys. And I wanted to thank them again just the same. It was great. My father and some of the guys in the film were all on our original Shady Rest, John Shippen committee, which then turned into Preserve Shady Rest at a latter date when we were fighting with the town to actually maintain the building. The rec director, Tom didn't mention, he said, we'll cut up a couple pieces of the floorboard and put them on the wall in a frame. He didn't mention also that we have a professional artist now redoing some of the pictures of the entertainers, and we're using the original floorboards as the frames. It's fascinating, knowing that they all walked and they performed on these floors. I wanted to say a few things, listening to everybody else. With Ty, I was going to say that there is a new book, another African-American book. It was made by Thurman and Ruby Simmons, and it's called The Legend. It was a story about John Shippen. They recently just published that. That'd be a good addition into the national black golf history and the social history. I think our groups, everybody that's been involved, how much Jim has gotten involved in our group now, and all of the groups involved in this expo, can really get together with us. We had the entertainers, the athletes, and the tennis there. And we have that triumvirate of power that can help lift this a lot higher. I thought what I want to mention about our town, we have done a lot with our vets. We really work out of our way to get veterans handicap parking and just doing the right thing for handicapped people. I love the idea of the handicapped golfers. There are a couple other golf tournaments besides the one next month that is at Innisbrook, the AGA tournament. But there is also the John Shippen that's in Detroit that's been for several years now that picks the top qualifiers, amateur or professional, to actually play in the Rocket Mortgage Classic and get invites to some of them. Tiger Woods invited one of the winners out to the Genesis, I think, in California, and he actually placed in the top 10, which was great. I also, Wendell Haskins, who runs the original Tee Golf Tournament in New Jersey in the fall, great place to go. He has an incredible golf tournament that includes entertainers. We honor athletes every year. They honor athletes every year. We're getting involved with him. The original golf tee, if nobody knows, was invented by a black dentist from Boston. So there's a lot of originals in this, and they're all of black heritage, which I love to hear. And there is also a women's Cognizant Cup that is held at Upper Montclair, and that's for all the female black amateurs and pros, and I think that's been a couple of years for that now, and that's in New Jersey every year, and it's about in the May area. I know shipping's a little bit later, more in the June, July area, and if everybody looks it up, I'm sure they can find out more about that. It was really great to get involved in it in the original phases. We didn't quite zoom forward, as all things in the 90s, 2000s didn't move forward enough for us to get diversity, equity, and inclusion, and for us to all get equality throughout this country. I am happy to know that I'm at least a white guy trying to work very hard on that in our group, and Tom and I. As Jim had said when he met us, he was pretty shocked that 2 white guys from the John Shipping Committee came to the Expo, and he made that a laughing matter at our big meeting that he presented. We've got a lot of support from local people. We're working on a lot more. That's all I have to say. But I look forward to this really growing and getting a lot more national recognition. I think we have to get a lot of entertainers involved in this, and especially the entertainers that golf. That's it.
Thank you, Jim. So I'd like to point out also that some of the programs that Preserve Shady Rest is working on is educational programs as far as the history of what Shady Rest was. So, for example, I grew up in the town of Scotch Plains and went to high school in Scotch Plains, and I never learned about any of Scotch Plains history, and that goes even with the Revolutionary War history that we have, which is very in-depth. Civil War history, I never knew what Shady Rest was as a young kid. To me, it was always Scotch Hills, the public golf course up the hill that you couldn't even stick the tee into the tee because the ground was so hard and they didn't have a watering system. It was really poorly conditioned back in the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. So at this point, we're running a program now with the public schools, and we have 5 elementary schools in our town, and each one of those schools, they're bringing their third grade classes on field trips around our town to teach them about the history. And one of the stops is going to be Shady Rest this year in the spring. We actually worked with one elementary school last late spring, and we brought 4 different class trips into Shady Rest and did a nice little presentation for the kids, told them about the history. We're educating the history departments about what to teach these kids, and we're trying to coordinate a program that all schools are going to use the same historical format about what Shady Rest is all about. So that's all going to take place this year in April and May. We've also started working with Jim Beatty, and we're going to start a new program for youth golf, and it's going to start in our schools. It's going to start in the 4th grades. It's in the infancy right now. Jim did visit Scotch Plains, and he came there in December, and he got a couple of days tour of what Jim and I are all about and what Scotch Plains is all about. We brought him around Union County. We brought him to numerous country clubs where those are the people that are going to help us with our programs and help facilitate the training and the locations of where kids can play. So at Shady Rest, we have simply 9 holes. We don't have a training facility. We do have a county training facility that has a first tee. We're in talks at this point with the first tee to try to incorporate a John Shippen Youth Academy into the first tee. We want to get noted as one of the first tee locations in Union County. These are some of the things that we're working on. We're also working on the historical aspect of the musical influx that took place there. So as we try to renovate Shady Rest, our idea is to have different floors of different eras of the history. So for example, in the 1920s, the basement was a nightclub. It was called the Villa Casanova. The nightclub had a speakeasy in it, and we want to try to recreate that speakeasy and open up a nightclub again in the basement once these renovations start to take place. On the 2nd floor of the building was the ladies' locker room, and it was the Willis's living quarters. And in that area, our plan is to have museum space for the ATA, the American Tennis Association, which was headquartered at Shady Rest during the 40s and the 50s. So we want to have an Althea Gibson Museum. And on the third floor is where John Shippen lived, and DeWitt Willis was the tennis pro who was one of the sons of Mr. Willis, the owner. And we want to try to create the John Shippen Museum on the third floor of Shady Rest. And at that point, once those things all take place, I think we're going to have a beautiful facility for people to come to visit. We work a little bit in conjunction with the USGA. They have a John Shippen portion of, he has his own spot where they show his clubs and a little bit of the history of John Shippen. And we know each other, and we would like to be able to trade back and forth and have like a display of John Shippen's paraphernalia, his memorabilia. So these things are all we're working on, and we're trying to generate funding for. Of course, these things take a lot of money. So hopefully, little by little, we can get the grants we need, we can get the interest that we need to try to come up with what it takes to renovate a building like that. So at this point, I'd like to ask Liz, if you'd like to come up and say a few words.
We have Liz, Sib, and Tom's wife, Nina, are also on our committee as well. Sib's our entertainment champ. And Liz is our newbie.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon. So my name is Elizabeth Corshu. I am from Elizabeth, New Jersey. How I walked into being a newly minted part of this community was that on a wonderful afternoon in August of 2024, I decided that I needed to lose 50 pounds off this body frame of mine. And I used to play tennis. I was MVP. I started playing tennis at the age of 10, actually the same year that Venus Williams was born in 1981. And part of my story is that I am a daughter of immigrant parents. Parents that are my dad is from Sierra Leone, West Africa, and my mom is from Haiti, Port-au-Prince. And the reason why I share that is because just like Dr. Sampson said, that a lot of times the integration part of African Americans coming into certain spaces and places of society is often lost, dismissed, or overlooked. And at a time in society, in this current, present 2025, where DEI is being dismantled, the history is being dismantled, it is a godsend that I walked into Shady Rest wanting to lose these 50 pounds off this body frame and learning how to play golf. And I met such kind-hearted, compassionate men, Jim Cecchio and Tom Donatelli, who opened me up with welcoming arms, just like the phrase that said, "a place for us." They really, truly welcomed me. And they began to show me around the campus. They didn't even know who I was. They just shared their story. And before I walked out, wanting to know what the membership was, they said, "You need to be part of this committee." I said, "Wow, let me think about it." So I say all that to say, I come with a lens of looking at things from a social perspective, a historical perspective, an integral perspective. So these two men, as well as those that have come before us that are honoring the past, moving in the present, and leading the future of golf, we are going to move forward as visionaries with the support of PGA Tour, with the support of sponsorship, with the support of entertainers, with the support of political allies. Black, white, green, purple, women, global, internationally, locally, state, we are going to move forward and do amazing things at Shady Rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And we did sort of coerce Elizabeth into getting involved one day, and I was a little surprised when I started to send her the emails, and it actually took a couple of weeks. Every time I sent an email to the group, it was like, oh, I forgot to send that to Elizabeth, and I would have to re-forward the email and put her email address in there. But little by little, I got it into the group, and she shows up to everything, and she showed up to this. And we really thank her for her being in her involvement, and thank you very much. So I'd like to introduce Sib Byers. He's our entertainment manager.
Good day, all. I don't have a lot to say, but my job is just to, you can't hear me? Oh. As next generation ambassador, it's very important getting the message out to people 35 and down. A lot of people don't realize the story or the impact or the significance. So even though we all talk about being over there, which is the tree, but what's the tree with no roots being in here? So I have a little acronym. I think it will help. Maybe you guys can participate. If you want to stand up, you can. If not, but SR, actually you should stand up. SRCC. If you can say it after me. SRCC. I'm sharing and relating for connecting and creating.
Okay, so Jim says we're out of time. If anybody has any questions or would like to discuss anything, we'll be at the Expo at 6:30. We'll have a little table. So, okay, you want to say something, Nia?
Yeah.
Just one more thing, Jim?
One more thing is very fast.
Okay.
So, I'm Nina Donatelli. We started this committee 2013. We are the beginning. A few people is the beginners of pushing up this committee to protect and restore the place. So I want to just share when I have one son, and he is 22 now. At that time, he was 12, something like that, even less. So when we used to go to the meetings, my son was coming. The meetings was 7 to 9, etc. So my son used to come with us, and he put his heart and soul to history, and he loved history. He took in college history honors, and until today he's graduated college. He worked in Chicago, and he do a lot of work for our committee. So he do marketing, he would build the website, he hired the people internship to help us with the social. Marketing. So in golf, I would recommend take your kids with you. It's very good to introduce them to your culture, your community, and to learn. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, the Shady Rest Committee. Perhaps they mentioned it, but I think it's worth mentioning it again. When I did visit Scotch Plains, had a meeting of the committee, and during that meeting, the Divine Nine Council of New Jersey presented them with a check for $3,000? $3,500. So folks are beginning to vote with their money. And this was their second donation, if I'm not mistaken. First one was $5,700. The Divine Nine, which, are the black fraternities and sororities. So thank you very much.